Captain James Walker watched the alien vessel approach through the viewport of the International Space Station. Humanity's first contact with an extraterrestrial species should have been a moment of celebration, but something about the Vex ship's movements seemed predatory. "They're not responding to any of our signals," Lieutenant Emma Reed reported, her fingers dancing across the console. Walker nodded grimly. "Keep trying all frequencies. Alert Earth Command about our situation." The Vex vessel, sleek and obsidian, had appeared without warning at the edge of Earth's orbit. Its design suggested technological advancement far beyond human capability. No visible propulsion system, no apparent weapons, yet Walker's military instincts screamed danger. "Captain," Reed called out, "they're scanning us. I'm detecting energy patterns throughout the station." "Defensive protocols," Walker ordered. "Everyone to emergency stations." The crew scrambled to their positions, but before anyone could reach safety, the station shuddered violently. Lights flickered as systems began failing across the board. "They've locked onto us with some kind of tractor beam," Reed reported, fear edging into her voice. Walker grabbed the station-wide comm. "All personnel, prepare for possible hostile action. This is not a drill." The alien ship drew closer, its hull opening like a massive maw. There was no communication, no demands, just the inexorable pull as the ISS was drawn toward the alien vessel. "Sir," Reed whispered, "what do they want?" Walker had no answer. He watched helplessly as the first sections of the station began to disappear into the Vex ship. From Earth, billions watched the live stream in horror as humanity's pride, the International Space Station, was consumed piece by piece. Scientists, politicians, and military leaders scrambled to understand, to respond, but they were woefully unprepared. Inside the station, Walker ordered evacuation pods launched with data cores containing everything they knew about the attackers. "Make sure Earth gets this information," he commanded as crew members raced for escape. Walker stayed behind, trying desperately to communicate with the aliens. "This is Captain James Walker of Earth. We come in peace. Please cease your actions and communicate." The only response was silence as more of the station disappeared. Reed refused to leave her captain. "Sir, the last pod is waiting." Walker shook his head. "Someone needs to try until the end. That's our duty." Around them, the station groaned as structural integrity failed. Through viewport windows, they could see parts of the station being methodically dismantled by robotic arms within the alien vessel. "They're not just destroying it," Reed realized with horror. "They're harvesting it." Walker nodded grimly. "Technology collectors. We're just insects to them." In the final moments, Walker transmitted continuously on all frequencies, sending Earth every scrap of information he could gather about the Vex vessel's capabilities. As the command center began to break apart, he grabbed Reed's hand. "Make sure they remember," he said quietly. "Make sure they prepare." Reed nodded, tears streaming in zero gravity, as she finally headed for the last escape pod. Walker turned back to the view screen and faced the alien ship. "You should have asked first," he said to the empty air. The escape pod jettisoned moments before the command center was ripped apart. Reed watched through the small window as her captain, still at his post, disappeared into the alien vessel. The last image transmitted to Earth was Walker, standing tall as the walls around him disintegrated. The Vex ship, its harvest complete, turned away from Earth without acknowledgement or explanation. It accelerated rapidly, vanishing into deep space before Earth's military could mount any response. But they had made a critical error. They had taken one life too many, the wrong life. They didn't understand what they had awakened. Captain James Walker would be the last human to die unanswered. 1 year after the ISS incident, the nations of Earth had achieved what many thought impossible: true global unity. The common threat represented by the Vex had dissolved old enmities and forged a singular purpose: preparation and defense of humanity. General Thomas Reed, father of Lieutenant Emma Reed, stood before the United Nations Security Council, his weathered face grim with purpose. Project Sentinel has reached completion ahead of schedule, he announced. The early warning system now covers our entire solar system. If the Vex return, we'll know. The faces around the table nodded solemnly. No applause followed this achievement. There was too much work left to do. And the Spear Initiative? Asked the Secretary General. The first fleet of defensive vessels will be ready for deployment within 6 months, Reed replied. Utilizing reverse-engineered technology from the ISS debris, we've made unprecedented advances. Emma Reed sat silently in the back of the chamber. She had become the reluctant face of humanity's resolve after her escape pod's recordings went public. The image of her captain, her friend, standing defiant in his final moments, had become a rallying symbol. After the meeting, she approached her father. The defense fleet is only part of the answer, she said quietly. We need to find them before they return. General Reed nodded. Project Horizon. It's classified beyond this room, but the first deep space vessel is nearly complete, and I've recommended you for command. Emma's breath caught. The Vex disappeared beyond Pluto's orbit. We have no idea where they went. That's why we've been analyzing Captain Walker's final transmission, her father replied. His scanner picked up trace elements in the Vex ship's wake. We believe we can track them. That evening, Emma stood in the cavernous construction bay beneath the lunar surface, staring up at humanity's first true starship, the HFY Walker. Named after her captain, the vessel represented everything humanity had learned and developed in the years since the attack. Dr. Alan Price, lead scientist for the propulsion systems, stood beside her. We've achieved what should have taken decades, he said, pride evident in his voice. The Vex gave us one advantage. Fear is a powerful motivator. Will it be enough? Emma asked. Price hesitated. Technologically, we're still behind, but we've built in features they won't expect. The Walker can mask its energy signature to appear as space debris. The hull contains a new alloy that absorbed and adapted to the Vex scanning technology. And the weapons systems are untested, Emma finished. Against their specific defenses, yes, Price admitted, but the principles are sound. We've designed them based on the vulnerabilities we observed during the attack. Emma nodded, remembering the Vex ship's methodical efficiency. They weren't expecting resistance. They harvested the station like they'd done it 100 times before. Exactly, Price said. They treated us like a primitive species. That's their weakness, arrogance. 1 week later, Emma stood on the bridge of the HFY Walker as the final crew members came aboard. 300 of Earth's finest scientists, engineers, and soldiers, all volunteers for a mission with no guarantee of return. Captain on deck, called Commander John Hayes, her second in command. At ease, Emma said. She took her place in the command chair, feeling its weight both physically and symbolically. Communications, send final departure message to Earth Command. Yes, Captain, replied Communications Officer Maria Torres. Earth Command acknowledges and wishes us good hunting. Emma looked around at her crew, determined faces, all bearing the same resolve that had driven humanity's incredible advancement over the past year. Navigation, set course for the Kuiper Belt. Follow the Vex particle trail. She paused, then added, let's show them humanity is not so easily dismissed. The HFY Walker rose silently from the lunar surface, its revolutionary engines leaving no visible exhaust. As it accelerated beyond the moon's orbit, Emma thought of Captain Walker's final words. They should have asked first. Now Earth was coming to collect an answer. 6 months into their journey, the HFY Walker drifted silently through an uncharted asteroid field at the edge of the Kuiper Belt. The ship's external surfaces had been designed to mimic the composition of common space debris, while internal systems operated at minimal power, a ghost ship waiting for prey. Emma stood in the darkened bridge, watching the holographic display that showed a Vex harvester ship methodically stripping resources from a large asteroid 2 kilometers away. For weeks they had tracked Vex activity, learning their patterns, waiting for the perfect opportunity. All departments report ready, Captain, Hayes whispered, though the Vex couldn't possibly hear them. Emma nodded. Deploy the drones. From the Walker's hull, 12 stealth drones detached and drifted toward the Vex vessel. Designed to attach to specific points on the alien ship, they would serve as both intelligence gatherers and weak points for the coming assault. Drones in position, reported Tactical Officer Ben Lewis. No sign they've been detected. Emma took a deep breath. Weapons Officer, target their propulsion system first, then communications. Execute on my mark. She thought of Captain Walker, of the callous way the Vex had harvested the ISS without communication or warning. Humanity would not make the same mistake. They would hit hard, fast, and without mercy. Mark. The Walker systems surged to full power as the ship shed its camouflage. Advanced railguns fired with devastating precision at the targets highlighted by the drones, while electromagnetic pulses targeted the Vex ship's electronic systems. The alien vessel, caught completely by surprise, shuddered under the assault. Its outer hull, designed to withstand micrometeorite impacts and radiation, proved vulnerable to the concentrated attack on specific structural points. Direct hits confirmed, Lewis called out. Their propulsion system is compromised. They're attempting to bring weapons online. Continue the assault, Emma ordered calmly. Prepare boarding teams. The second wave of attacks disabled the Vex ship's external defenses. As the alien vessel drifted helplessly, 3 shuttles launched from the Walker, carrying 60 combat-ready soldiers. Captain, Torres called out, we're receiving a transmission from the Vex ship. Emma's eyes narrowed. So now they want to talk. On screen. The view screen flickered to life, showing a humanoid figure with iridescent skin and multifaceted eyes. Its mouth didn't move as words translated into English filled the bridge. Cease your attack, primitive species. You do not understand the consequences of your actions. Emma stepped forward. I am Captain Emma Reed of Earth. You harvested our space station and killed our people without warning or provocation. You took lives that were not yours to take. The alien seemed momentarily confused. The resource collection was standard procedure for pre-spacefaring civilizations. Compensation will be arranged with your planetary leadership. Compensation. Emma's voice was ice. You call murder resource collection. You didn't even attempt communication. Communication with developing species is not protocol, the alien replied dismissively. Your technological level did not warrant diplomatic interaction. On the tactical display, Emma could see the boarding teams had breached the Vex vessel. Well, she said coldly, consider this our introduction. She cut the transmission as reports flooded in from the boarding teams. The Vex, apparently unused to direct physical confrontation, offered minimal resistance. Within hours, the Earth forces had secured the alien ship, capturing both crew and invaluable technology. The Vex commander was brought aboard the Walker and taken to the brig. Emma went to face him personally. Your actions are unprecedented, the alien said, studying her with compound eyes that betrayed no emotion. No species has ever reacted this way to standard harvesting operations. Because you've never harvested humans before, Emma replied. Let me explain something about Earth. Throughout our history, we fought each other relentlessly. But the one thing that unites us instantly is an outside threat. She leaned closer to the containment field. You took one life that mattered to us. Captain James Walker. In doing so, you united an entire planet against you. The man you killed standing at his post. He was my friend and mentor, and his death has echoed across our world. The Vex commander seemed to consider this. You pursue vengeance for one life. Inefficient. Emma smiled coldly. No, we pursued justice for one life, and protection for billions more. Your harvester has transmitted everything that happened here to your home world. Tell them this, Earth is not a resource to be harvested. We are not primitive, and we are not defenseless. As she turned to leave, the alien spoke again. You have attacked a minor collection vessel. The response will be significant. Emma paused at the door. "We're counting on it." The stolen Vex harvester proved an intelligence goldmine. Dr. Price and his team worked day and night, decoding the alien navigation system, which revealed something unexpected. The Vex weren't a single civilization, but a vast corporate entity that harvested resources across multiple star systems. They're essentially a massive interstellar corporation, Price explained during the senior staff briefing. Different divisions handle different resources. Earth was cataloged centuries ago as a developing world with valuable biological and technological potential. Emma studied the star charts they'd extracted. "And this is their central hub." Price nodded. "What we'd call corporate headquarters. The Nexus, as they refer to it. All harvesting operations report there." 3 months after capturing the harvester, the UES Walker approached the edge of Vex-controlled space. Using the stolen vessel as both disguise and guide, they navigated through increasingly busy shipping lanes. Massive transport ships moved raw materials between industrial worlds and refinement centers. The scale of the operation was staggering. "They've industrialized entire star systems," Hayes remarked, watching the sensor feeds. "No wonder they viewed Earth as just another resource." Emma nodded grimly. "And there's our target." The Nexus hung in space before them, a massive artificial structure orbiting a yellow star. Shaped like an immense wheel with spokes connecting to a central hub, it pulsed with energy and activity. Hundreds of ships moved in carefully coordinated patterns around it. "How do we approach without being detected?" Hayes asked. "We don't," Emma replied. "We walk in through the front door." The plan was audacious. Using identification codes from the captured harvester, the Walker would approach the Nexus disguised as the Vex vessel returning with urgent information. A skeleton crew would remain aboard the Walker, hidden in a nearby asteroid field, while Emma led a small team into the heart of Vex operations. "This is beyond risky, Captain," Hayes argued during the final planning session. "Let me lead the team." Emma shook her head. "I need you commanding the Walker. If something goes wrong, you're their best chance of escape." 24 hours later, Emma stood in the command center of the disguised harvester alongside Lewis, Torres, and 3 combat specialists. They had adapted their appearances using biomimetic suits derived from Vex technology, allowing them to pass visual inspections. "Remember," Emma told her team, "our goal is the central data core. We place the virus, extract any information about Earth and other targeted worlds, then get out before it activates." The virus was Dr. Price's masterstroke, designed to corrupt the Vex central database and insert false information about Earth, marking it as extremely dangerous and not worth the resource investment to harvest. Harvester CV-371, "You are cleared for maintenance, Doc 47. Came the automated response to their approach signal. Torres, who had mastered the Vex communication protocols, sent the acknowledgement signal. The disguised ship glided smoothly toward the assigned dock, indistinguishable from dozens of others moving around the Nexus. Once docked, they moved with practiced precision through the station. Their stolen access codes worked perfectly, allowing them to bypass security checkpoints as they made their way toward the central hub. "It's strange," Lewis whispered as they moved through a vast atrium filled with different alien species. "They all work together like this is completely normal." Emma observed the diverse beings moving purposefully about their business. To them, it is normal. Just corporations exploiting resources. They probably don't even think about the consequences to the worlds they harvest. They had nearly reached the central data core when their stolen access code failed at a security checkpoint. The Vex security officer, a tall, insectoid being, chittered suspiciously at their group. Lewis, without hesitation, stepped forward and presented alternative documentation they had prepared. He spoke in the clicking language they had learned, explaining a plausible system malfunction. For a tense moment, Emma thought they had been discovered. Then the security officer reluctantly waved them through. "That was too close," Torres breathed once they were past. "It won't be the last challenge," Emma replied as they approached the massive doors of the central data core. This is where it gets complicated. The core itself was a massive spherical chamber lined with quantum processors. In the center floated a pulsing crystal matrix, the heart of the VEX operation. "Begin the upload," Emma ordered as Lewis connected their device to the system. As the virus began transferring, Torres monitored the nearby console. "Captain," she called urgently, "I'm seeing data about Earth and hundreds of other worlds. They're all scheduled for harvesting within the next decade." Emma joined her, scanning the information. "Download everything. We need to warn these civilizations." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. "The system detected the intrusion," Lewis reported. "We have minutes before security arrives." "Is the virus uploaded?" Emma demanded. 80%. Lewis responded, fingers flying across the interface. "We need another 2 minutes." "You've got one," Emma said, drawing her weapon. Everyone else, defensive positions. As security forces converged on their location, Emma made a decision that would change the course of the conflict. Rather than retreat, she targeted the physical crystal matrix at the center of the room. "Captain, destroying that could alert every VEX outpost in the galaxy," Torres warned. "Good," Emma replied. "I want them all to know what happens when you threaten Earth." The concentrated fire from their advanced weapons cracked the crystal structure. Energy surged erratically throughout the chamber as the system began to fail. "Virus upload complete," Lewis announced. "Fall back to the ship," Emma ordered. "Our message has been delivered." The escape from the Nexus became legendary among Earth forces. As alarms blared and security forces converged, Emma's team fought their way back through increasingly chaotic corridors. The damage to the central crystal had triggered cascading failures throughout the station, creating the perfect cover for their retreat. The VEX relied too much on their systems, Emma observed as they raced past confused workers and malfunctioning security checkpoints. They don't know how to handle unexpected chaos. When they reached their stolen harvester, they found the docking clamps locked down by emergency protocols. "I can override it," Torres said, accessing the external panel. "But it will take time we don't have." Emma looked back at the approaching security forces. "Lewis, give us that time." What followed was a desperate last stand as Lewis and the combat specialists held off waves of VEX security. Unlike the harvester crew they'd encountered earlier, these forces were trained fighters, but they still moved with a rigid precision that made them predictable. Clamps released. Torres called out, "We're clear to launch." Emma helped drag a wounded Lewis aboard as the ship's doors sealed. Moments later, they blasted away from the Nexus, dodging defensive fire from suddenly alert weapon systems. "Send the extraction signal to the Walker," Emma ordered as Torres took the helm. The UES Walker emerged from hiding behind a nearby moon, weapons blazing to clear a path for the smaller vessel. As the harvester docked with the Walker, Hayes already had the engines primed for immediate departure. "The Nexus is in complete disarray," he reported as Emma reached the bridge. "Whatever you did in there worked." "Not just disarray," Emma said, catching her breath. "We've corrupted their entire database with false information about Earth and installed backdoors into their communication systems. Dr. Price, start the data analysis immediately. We need to know which other worlds are targeted for harvesting." As the Walker accelerated away from VEX space, they witnessed the beginning of something unexpected. The virus was designed to corrupt data and create backdoors, but it had found vulnerabilities no one had anticipated. "Captain," Price called from the science lab hours later, "you need to see this." On the screens, they watched as VEX ships throughout the sector began behaving erratically. Some turned on each other, others simply shut down. The virus spread to their command protocols. Price explained, "It's not just corrupting data, it's corrupting their entire command structure." Emma watched in stunned silence. "We never intended this level of disruption." "Apparently," Price said, "their entire network operates on a shared platform with minimal security partitioning. Once our virus reached the central hub, it propagated throughout their systems. For 3 days, they monitored the growing chaos in Vex space as they sped toward Earth. The corporation that had treated planets as mere resources was facing systemic collapse as ships refused orders, harvesting operations aborted mid-process, and communication broke down between divisions. Then came the most unexpected development of all. As the Walker reached the edge of charted space, they intercepted transmissions from dozens of previously unknown civilizations, all victims of or targets for Vex harvesting operations. "They're rising up," Torres reported in amazement. "Using our virus as cover, they're attacking Vex outposts across 3 sectors." Emma called an emergency meeting of the senior staff. "This has evolved beyond our original mission. We intended to protect Earth, but we've inadvertently sparked a galactic uprising. The question is," Hayes said soberly, "do we just go home, or do we help coordinate this resistance?" Emma studied the star map showing the spreading rebellion. "We have an opportunity not just to protect Earth, but to end the Vex threat permanently and liberate dozens of worlds." The decision was unanimous. The Walker would return to Earth, but only long enough to deliver their findings and prepare a proper diplomatic and military response. Earth would no longer stand alone. They would build a coalition of the worlds threatened by the Vex. 6 weeks later, Emma addressed the United Nations General Assembly, standing tall in her uniform as she delivered news that would forever change humanity's place in the cosmos. "We are not alone in facing this threat," she told the assembled leaders of Earth. "Across the stars, dozens of civilizations have suffered at the hands of the Vex. Some have been harvested repeatedly over centuries, others stand on the brink of destruction." She gestured to the alien representatives who had accompanied the Walker back to Earth, the first official diplomatic delegation from beyond the solar system. "We have an opportunity and a responsibility, not just to defend our world, but to lead an alliance that will ensure no civilization faces extinction at the hands of those who see life as merely another resource to exploit." By the time she finished speaking, the course was set. Earth would go from victim to liberator. The revenge for one life would become salvation for billions. 1 year after Emma's address to the United Nations, Earth had become the unlikely headquarters for the Anti-Vex Coalition. The lunar surface, once barren, now hosted a sprawling diplomatic complex where representatives from 37 species collaborated on strategy and shared technology. Admiral Thomas Reed, promoted after the Walker's successful mission, stood beside his daughter as they watched the latest additions to Earth's defense fleet undergo final testing in orbit. "If you had told me 2 years ago that humans would be leading an interstellar alliance, I'd have said you were writing science fiction," he mused. Emma smiled slightly. "Sometimes reality is stranger than fiction." The new vessels incorporated technology from a dozen worlds, each contributing their strengths. The Meridian, sleek and powerful, featured propulsion systems from the aquatic Tellurians. The Defiant carried weapons designed by the crystalline Exorians, whose world had been harvested 3 times in their recorded history. But the flagship of the Coalition fleet was the James Walker I, twice the size of the original Walker, and designed specifically to coordinate the diverse ships of the Allied forces. "They're calling it the Liberation Fleet," Admiral Reed said. "First mission launches next week." Emma nodded. "And I'll be commanding it." The past year had transformed humanity's understanding of the galaxy. They learned they weren't alone in their struggle. The Vex had been harvesting developing worlds for millennia, taking resources, technology, and sometimes entire populations. Some species had been set back centuries in their development by repeated harvesting. What made Earth unique wasn't that they had been targeted, but that they had fought back effectively. The image of Captain Walker standing defiant in his final moments had become a symbol beyond Earth, translated into dozens of alien languages and shared across Coalition worlds. The strategy center beneath Olympus Mons on Mars had become the nerve center of the Coalition's war effort. There, Emma met with her diverse command staff to finalize the upcoming operation. "The Vex corporate structure is still in disarray," reported Ketal. a tall, feathered being whose homeworld had been one of the first to join Earth's coalition. But they're beginning to adapt countermeasures against our virus. Dr. Price, now head of Coalition R&D, nodded. We anticipated this. Their system architecture is being compartmentalized to prevent another cascading failure, which means our window of opportunity is closing, Emma concluded, studying the holographic display of Vex territory. We need to strike their primary shipyards before they can rebuild their harvesting fleet. The plan was bold. Simultaneous attacks on 3 major Vex production facilities, coordinated with uprising forces on worlds currently under Vex control. If successful, it would cripple the corporation's ability to resume harvesting operations for years. There are risks, cautioned Commander Hayes, who would be leading one of the strike forces. The Vex still outclass us technologically in many areas. True, Emma acknowledged. But we have 2 advantages they can't match. First, diversity. Each coalition species brings unique capabilities the Vex haven't encountered together before. Second, motivation. We're fighting for our survival, while they're just protecting profit margins. 3 days before the fleet's departure, Emma visited the memorial on the rebuilt International Space Station. A life-sized hologram of Captain James Walker stood at the center, surrounded by the names of all who had died during the original Vex attack. She stood before the image of her former captain, remembering his final words transmitted to Earth. "You were right," she said quietly. "They should have asked first." Another figure joined her, Ambassador Lorne of the Galarians, whose artistic, 6-limbed form moved with graceful precision. The Galarians had lost entire cities to Vex harvesting. "On my world," Lorne said in the musical translation of his language, "we have a saying. From one seed, forests grow. Your Captain Walker was that seed." Emma nodded. "One life. It seems a small thing to start a galactic war." "Not war," Lorne corrected gently. "Liberation, and it is often thus. Great change pivots on single moments, single lives." His upper limbs made a gesture of respect toward Walker's image. Among coalition species, his name is becoming synonymous with defiance against overwhelming odds. The day of launch arrived under clear skies. The Liberation Fleet minus 117 vessels from 23 coalition species assembled in Earth orbit in a display of unity unprecedented in human history. From the bridge of the James Walker Emma addressed the combined fleet. 2 years ago, the Vex came to Earth believing us primitive and helpless. They took lives that were not theirs to take, harvested resources that were not theirs to claim. They left believing us defeated. She paused, looking at the diverse faces of her bridge crew, human and alien united in common purpose. Today, we show them the truth. No civilization stands alone against their predation any longer. No world will be harvested without consequence, and the echo of Earth's defiance will be heard across the stars. As the fleet engaged their engines in perfect synchronization, Emma gave the order that would begin the next chapter of the conflict. All ships set course for Vex Shipyard Alpha. The liberation begins now. The Battle of Shipyard Alpha would later be studied in military academies across 100 worlds. The Vex, despite their technological superiority, had never faced a coordinated attack by multiple species, each employing different tactics and technologies. Emma's strategy relied on controlled chaos. Each coalition fleet operated with relative autonomy within a larger framework, making the combined force unpredictable and adaptable in ways the hierarchical Vex command structure couldn't match. From the bridge of the James Walker Emma coordinated the assault as coalition forces penetrated the shipyard's outer defenses. The Axorian crystalline ships absorbed energy weapons and redirected them back at Vex vessels. Talarian submersibles, designed for their water world, but equally effective in vacuum, executed impossible maneuvers to bypass defensive grids. The Vex are attempting to adapt their defensive algorithms, reported Ketal, monitoring enemy communications. But they can't create effective countermeasures against so many different attack patterns simultaneously. Emma nodded, watching as Earth's vessels provided devastating railgun support for the more specialized alien craft. Maintain pressure on all fronts. Don't give them time to analyze any single approach. The tide turned decisively when coalition forces breached the shipyard's central control hub. Led by Commander Hayes, the boarding parties secured the facility while Dr. Price's team installed a modified version of their original virus, one designed specifically to disable rather than corrupt, allowing them to capture the shipyard largely intact. Similar reports came in from the other two targeted facilities. Within 26 hours, the Coalition controlled the primary Vex production centers. But victory came at a cost. 23 Coalition vessels destroyed, thousands of lives lost across multiple species. Yet compared to the billions threatened by continued Vex harvesting, it was a price all had agreed was necessary. In the aftermath, as Coalition engineers studied the captured facilities, they discovered something unexpected. Evidence that the Vex themselves were not the originating force, but merely one division of an even larger interstellar conglomerate. They call it the Consortium, Dr. Price explained during the emergency summit held aboard the Walker. From what we can piece together, it's a collection of corporate entities that have dominated this sector of the galaxy for millennia. The Vex are just their resource acquisition division. Emma studied the data with growing concern. So we've defeated a subsidiary, not the parent company. Essentially, Price agreed. But our actions have disrupted their operations significantly. The Consortium hasn't faced meaningful resistance in thousands of years. The Coalition leadership debated their next steps. Some advocated consolidating their gains, others pushing for immediate strikes against the Consortium itself. After 3 days of discussion, they reached a consensus that reflected a fundamental shift in thinking. We're not just fighting against something, Emma told the assembled representatives. We're fighting for something. The right of all species to develop without exploitation, the principle that life is not a resource to be harvested. The Coalition would establish a permanent defensive perimeter around formerly Vex-controlled space, create a mutual defense pact among all member worlds, and extend invitations to other threatened civilizations. They would also send diplomatic envoys to the Consortium, offering negotiation rather than continuation of conflict. 6 months later, Emma stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Coalition headquarters, built in Earth orbit as a symbol of humanity's central role in the Alliance. Beside her stood Admiral Reed and representatives from the core Coalition worlds. The Consortium representatives have agreed to meet, Admiral Reed informed the group. They're sending a diplomatic delegation rather than a corporate one. That's a significant shift in how they perceive us. They're finally asking first, Emma remarked with grim satisfaction. The meeting with Consortium representatives took place on neutral territory, a space station constructed specifically for the purpose at the edge of Coalition space. Emma led the delegation alongside diplomats from 12 Coalition worlds. The Consortium representatives were not what anyone expected, not fearsome corporate overlords, but pragmatic administrators who viewed the Coalition uprising as an unexpected distribution problem. Your resistance has proven surprisingly costly, stated the lead representative, a tall, elegant being with silvery skin. The board has determined that continued conflict is not economically viable. Not economically viable, Emma repeated coldly. Let me be clear, this isn't about profit margins. This is about the right to exist without being treated as resources. The negotiations lasted weeks, with both sides maneuvering for advantage. In the end, the Coalition secured what they had fought for: recognition of sovereign rights for all member worlds and a binding agreement prohibiting harvesting operations in Coalition territory. The Consortium, for their part, maintained access to established trade routes and received guarantees against Coalition expansion into their core systems. Not a perfect peace, but a sustainable one. On the 5th anniversary of the ISS attack, Emma stood in the Grand Hall of the Coalition Assembly as representatives from 73 species celebrated the formal ratification of the Interstellar Charter of Rights, a document that established fundamental protections for all sentient beings regardless of technological development. The centerpiece of the hall was a memorial that had become sacred to dozens of worlds, a holographic recreation of Captain James Walker's final stand. Beneath it, inscribed in multiple languages, were his last words: "You should have asked first." Emma, now Admiral Reed after her father's retirement, felt a sense of completion as she addressed the assembly. 5 years ago, one human stood against an overwhelming force, knowing he couldn't win but refusing to surrender without resistance. The Vex took his life, believing it insignificant. They couldn't understand that sometimes a single life can change everything. She gestured to the diverse assembly before her, beings of all forms united in common cause. Today, we honor not just Captain Walker, but all those across the stars who refused to be merely resources, who insisted that life, all life, has value beyond what can be harvested or exploited. The echo of Earth's defiance has become a chorus of freedom that spans the galaxy. As the assembly rose in standing ovation, Emma looked up at the image of her former captain. From his one life, taken without permission, had grown a movement that transformed the stars themselves. Earth's revenge had indeed echoed across the galaxy, not as destruction, but as liberation. They had taken one life, and the universe would never be the same.